Introduction. My cousin, Kaylee Langford, pushes me down the ski slope when there's an avalanche. My boyfriend, Ferguson, lifts her into his arms and leaves. He seems to have forgotten that I'm buried underneath the snow mountain. He leaves me stranded at the valley for 7 days. He's furious when he finds me. Introduction. My cousin, Kaylee Langford, pushes me down the ski slope when there's an avalanche. My boyfriend, Ferguson, lifts her into his arms and leaves. He seems to have forgotten that I'm buried underneath the snow mountain. He leaves me stranded at the valley for 7 days. He's furious when he finds me. You should be glad nothing went wrong with Kaylee's arms. Otherwise, the only way you could atone would be to die on this mountain. Our wedding is cancelled. We'll have it once you realize what you did wrong. He thinks I'll cry or kick up a fuss, but I merely nod and say, okay. He doesn't know that I've made a deal with the moon goddess. In 6 days, I'll be giving up the things that mean most to me, my love for Atlas and my memories of him. Once that happens, I'll forget everything about him and start afresh somewhere new. What does a wedding matter when the Ember Sloane who loved him is now dead? Ember Sloane was shoved down the snowy mountain by Kaylee Langford during the avalanche at the ski resort. Kaylee had only dislocated her arms and fell in place, while Ember plummeted to the bottom of the mountain. Ember was stranded in the Anera Mountains for an entire 7 days. She probably would never have been found if it hadn't been for the branch that pierced her foot, leaving a trail of blood stark against the pure white snow. Crimson blood spread across the snow, resembling a blooming red flower. Ember leaned weakly against a tree stump, and she was so frail and lifeless that she seemed to be on the verge of dissolving into the snow. When the security team spotted her, they immediately used their walkie-talkie to notify Ferguson. Mr. Ferguson, we've found Miss Sloane. Soon, a helicopter descended from the sky. The gust of wind from its blades nearly prevented Ember from opening her eyes. Even so, she caught sight of Atlas at first glance. However, trailing behind him was Kaylee. Atlas rushed toward her. He unleashed a torrent of abuse upon seeing her staggering figure. Why are you always running off and making trouble? I had to mobilize thousands of people to search for you. If you'd just stayed where you were, we wouldn't have spent 5 or 6 days looking for you. The security team's been working around the clock because of you. Can't you go a single day without causing trouble? It was November, and the mountain was sealed by snow in the bitter cold of sub-zero temperatures. Initially, Ember feared getting lost and only dared to stay put. She endured the freezing cold while anxiously waiting for Atlas to rescue her. She thought to herself that Atlas surely wouldn't leave her here to die. But as night fell, darkness enveloped everything. Glowing green eyes stared menacingly from the shadows, and the distant roars of unknown beasts echoed all around her. Terrified, Ember trembled uncontrollably. She clutched onto a torch all night, unable to close her eyes. As her last bit of food ran out, she was forced to search for wild vegetables and fruits. However, her fingers became raw and numb from digging in the harsh winter, yet she still struggled to find enough to stave off hunger. 1 day passed, then 2. Then 3. The small flicker of hope in Ember's heart was extinguished, like a candle snuffed out by the relentless wind. She simply lowered her head in silence as she listened to Atlas' reprimands, too exhausted to respond. Atlas always found her annoying to noisy to unreasonable, or too manipulative. No matter the situation, no matter how much she explained, his response was always the same. Are you making things up again? What kind of tricks are you trying to pull this time? That was why she no longer wanted to argue with him. She'd just let whatever he said to be it. A bodyguard nearby sneezed from the wind and muttered quietly, "Wolves are common in these mountains." If she'd stayed put, she'd probably be a pile of bones by now. Oh, Kaylee covered her mouth and feigned surprise. Ember, is this your friend? The bodyguard was caught off guard by the question, and he shook his head in confusion. No. I don't know her. It was his first day on the job. He hadn't even memorized all his co-workers' names yet, let alone know Ember. Kaylee gave a knowing smile. I see. You seem to care about her so much, so I thought you knew each other. Or maybe it's just Ember's charm. She gets people speaking up for her within minutes of meeting them. As expected. Atlas' face darkened instantly. Ember, can't you control yourself for once? He then turned to the bodyguard who had spoken, and said coldly, You don't bother coming back to work, and let me make one thing clear. I'm your boss. If anyone else doesn't know their place, you can all leave as well. Upon hearing this, everyone stepped back cautiously as they were terrified of losing their jobs. Kaylee was the first to approach Ember. Ember, are you okay? She even reached out as if she wanted to help her up. Atlas, Ember didn't intentionally dislocate my arms. She's just been spoiled and headstrong since she was little. Maybe she didn't like me and acted out, that's all. Atlas, don't be mad at Ember anymore. My arms have been healing for days, and Ember's been stuck on the snowy mountain all this time. She must be homesick. Let's just leave. Atlas' voice turned icy. You should be grateful that Kaylee's arms are fine. Otherwise, the only way you could atone would be to die on this mountain. The wedding that's a week from now is cancelled. It'll happen when you realize your mistakes. Atlas' expression grew even more severe. God, everyone knows this natural ski slope is dangerous and unprotected. How could you be wandering around just for a good photo? That's on you. Ember, I would have ended our engagement long ago if it weren't for the debt I owe your parents. 3 years ago, Ember's parents died in a car accident while saving Atlas' parents. Her relatives quickly divided up the Sloane family's assets, leaving nothing behind for her. Thus, the two naturally became a couple. Atlas, however, was extraordinarily popular. Everyone in the capital knew about the dashing eldest grandson of the Ferguson family, whose charm and good looks drew admirers from one end of the city to the other.